and I am so glad, okay? I thought it was going to go till 5 o'clock, but they went ahead and let us sleep a little bit early. So here's the thing. They finished up with their closing argument, and tomorrow morning we're going to start with the defense. Now, I'm expecting that it will be Mark Agnifilo that is actually going to deliver the closing argument tomorrow. Okay, so let's talk about it. So when we came back after break, you know, there was a report that Diddy was looking nervous, that he was looking upset or whatever, clenching his hands when certain things were going on. But I didn't see any of that, as I told you all earlier, because it was so crowded I couldn't really see. So I made it my business to check it out, to try to see what he was doing when I came back from break. And he was smiling, okay? He was smiling, throwing up the heart signals to his family, the symbols to his family. And then also, Misa Hilton is there, and he was putting the prayer hands up to her. Okay, so I didn't see him looking nervous. He looked like he was in good spirits and smiling and all of that. Now, that's just what I saw. But so anyway, once we came back, they talked about 3 specific examples that show guilt on count 4. Hey, Sylvia, how you doing, beloved? So they said these incidents didn't happen in isolation and that many aspects of these situations continue to occur. Now, the wind is blowing out here, y'all, so I'm multitasking. I'm trying to hold my tripod still and read my notes, so I'm gonna try to hold it still with my foot. Okay, please pay attention. This is all a mess. Okay, so anyway, okay, so they said April 2023, Diddy started paying Jane Doe's rent. Now, this was financial coercion, they say, and he made her feel obligated to do what he wanted her to do. Well, maybe that love contract that he got her to sign and agree to had a lot to do with that, because they didn't bring that back up. But let's not forget that Jane Doe actually signed and agreed to a love contract, which basically said that she would do what he wanted her to do and he would pay for her rent. Okay, but with that all being said, they went on to say the pattern of rug use with a D that helped her to deal with the hotel nights. And they said that the rugs were also a way to get Jane to do exactly what he wanted. Now, in Miami in 2024, he gave Jane something that she had never done before, a different type of illegal substance. And this was some liquid Molly, honey. That's what they say. He gave her liquid Molly. Now, remember how Jonathan Oddie said that Diddy was taking liquid Coca-Cola? Y'all remember that? Said it was pink, if y'all recall. Hey, beloved, see you tomorrow. Okay, so that all been said he gave her some liquid Molly, which gave her a high that heightened her level of sexual energy. Now, they say his coercion of Jane led to a serious pattern of rug use. And that in fact, one time, I'm losing my voice, and said that in fact, one time she tried to, you know, or a few times she tried to have the hotel nights without doing any illegal substances. She got so disgusted and she was so sickened by it that she literally vomited. They said that he made her go ahead and keep doing it anyway. Okay, he was cheering her on, talking about, come on, finish strong, you can do it. Okay, don't give up now, don't stop, push through. And all of that, honey, like he's somebody's coach at a high school football game, if you will. But anyway, so they said all of these factors in concert led to Jane Doe doing things that he wanted her to do. Okay, and it says that she was doing all of these acts due to fear of the consequences if she didn't agree to what he was telling her to do. Now, with that all being said, they say these things make him guilty. Okay, then they talked about the racketeering conspiracy. Okay, they said the defendant recruited, and the defendant, of course, is Diddy. They said he recruited Cassie for the freak-offs. Okay, please pay attention. Now, that being said, they talk about how, with the S trafficking, okay? With the S trafficking, they said the defendant knowingly recruited, enticed, harbored, and transported these women, okay? As well as the S workers. They say that Cassie and Diddy, early in their relationship, everything was going fine, and then there became abuse. By the end of Cassie and Diddy's relationship, there was a whole bunch of turmoil. Now, they said in the beginning, Diddy pursued Cassie, took her out on a yacht, wined her and dined her, and then when he got her on that yacht, he gave her some ecstasy, okay? And that was the first time they had sex, okay? And then after that, it was just a few months later when he got her to do the freak-offs. So then they started talking about the abuse, the scars, the bruises, the gash. Remember the gash that was on her forehead, like right above the eyebrow or right literally in the eyebrow area where she had to get plastic surgery. They showed pictures of that. They also went on to show that video again where he was beating the crap out of her in the hallway, and they used that to, you know, to segue into the beatings and the violence that these women often endured due to his nefarious behavior. So then they started talking about D-Rock. They said D-Rock and KK witnessed the abuse, and they knew about these things, and in fact, in some instances, helped to cover these things up, which is why I think that KK and D-Rock should be sitting right next to Diddy. Okay, how are they just getting off scot-free? I have several questions. Please pay attention. Okay, now with that being said, they talked about a time where they say Diddy kicked down 3 doors. Okay, kicked down 3 doors. All right, that's how mad he was. And then they talk about when they had dinner in New York City and he hit Cassie upside the head. Okay, and then when he beat her up at Prince's party. And then they said her mom photographed the bruises. Remember that? Her mom said she wanted to document it. So then they talked more about the freak-offs. They talked about the red lights. You know, he had to have those red lights. And in fact, they actually showed a photo on the screen with Diddy sitting in a room where you could tell that it was illuminated by this bright red light. Okay? Like he was in fact in the red light district or something like that. So they talked about him beating Cassie. Hold on. Now they say that of course Cassie agreed to the first freak off just like Jane Doe did. And then after that it just became all too much. He started threatening to release the SEX tapes with Cassie just like he did with Jane Doe. Okay, so anyway, they also talked about how he had Cassie trained. They said he had Cassie trained to obey him. Okay? Basically, they talked about there was a fight during a freak-off in Manhattan. Actually, there was 2 more fights during a freak-off in Manhattan. And they said he had trained her well to obey. Okay, they talk about how he made Cassie have SEX with a male S-worker. They got into it about that. They said he had the power and he would use threats. He would threaten to release tapes, pictures. And in fact, there was one point where he supposedly had talked to Cassie's mom and told Cassie's mom about a threesome. And Cassie said to him in a text message that she was so sick and disgusted. She said, you know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about the time you told my mother about a threesome. Now, who in the hell tells someone's mother about that? That is absolutely outrageous, okay? Can you imagine the embarrassment? Not to mention when he supposedly told her mother or threatened to tell her mother about the videos and the pictures. Okay? Please pay attention. Now, let's keep going. Now, they also made a point to say that Cassie would give in to his demands and do certain things because she was afraid of what would happen if she said no. Because she knew about his violence and was afraid of the violence, and she didn't want to make him upset. And then the prosecution said, I'm sure that the defense is going to tell you that this was all voluntary and this was just adults making choices. Charlotte says, have a good day, beloved.
I got your.
Okay, thank you. Now it says, Charlotte says he has no respect for anyone. So, and then they were very dramatic in this presentation when it got toward this part because they said, imagine the terror of not knowing when or where the next punch is going to come from. That's what they said. So they said using Ruggs with a D at the freak off was a way for her to to disassociate herself. And that's Cassie they were talking about. They said that was a way for her to disassociate herself, and it was a way for her to numb the things that were going on. Now basically this is obviously what she told the feds. Okay, because they had this written out, they showed it on the screen or whatever. It wasn't a text message, but this is obviously what she said when she spoke with the feds. Okay, and you know what the jury is going to have to determine when they see and hear this, when they deliberate over this evidence after hearing the defense, of course, is do they think that this was actually forced fraud and coercion, or do they feel like it was consensual? That's the big argument, as we all know. Now, the bottom line is they're saying that these women constantly had UTIs. They sometimes had to have relations when they had UTIs. This is what the prosecution is saying. And saying that how it would burn and all of that or whatever. And so they really focused a lot on that in the maybe the last hour of the closing arguments. And then they said, but here's the thing that gets me. They said that Cassie basically said sometimes these freak-offs would last 12 to 30 hours, and the longest one actually lasted 4 days. Now, Jane Doe said that they would last approximately 30 hours, but the longer one lasted 3 days. Now, here's my thing. They said they weren't allowed to go to sleep and they would be taking illegal substances to keep them awake. My question is, how's anybody having all this sex for hours and whole days? How's anybody doing this? How's anybody watching it for this long? Does that make sense to you all? Like, how is anybody doing this for 30 hours, 3 and 4 days? Okay, did you all stop to think about that? And you're not eating, you're not stopping to get a glass of water. You don't have to go to the bathroom. I mean, even if you're taking illegal substances, how could you stay awake for days at a time? I mean, I don't know. I've never done rugs with a D, so I guess you could. But I'm just saying, this all sounds real crazy. Okay, Claudette says, unbelievable. Right, that does sound unbelievable. That's why I'm saying, like, I can't believe 30 hours straight, or even worse, like she said, the longest time was 4 days. And they also said that this was a part of the forced labor, because they said that Cassie said that the freak-offs became a job and that she couldn't focus on anything else. So they said that is part of what makes it forced labor. Okay, then they read the elements that you need to prove forced labor, just to reiterate their point, saying that's exactly what it was. Now, what do you think the jury, do you think the jury's going to go for that? Or what do you think the jury think that they're reaching, that they're grasping at straws? And then they talked about Cassie's 29th birthday. Okay, she wanted to do something with Diddy, but she supposedly complained because she had to have a freak off. And then they talked about Deontay. Deontay said Diddy was mad because she didn't want to do it. Okay? And then they said he robbed her of her self-esteem. And they said this is why he should be found guilty on that count. And then also another thing I found was interesting. They said KK was known to get men to be able to access the hotel rooms. And also KK knew about the videos and all of that stuff and would often engage in cover-ups. Her and D-Rock. Now, they said KK knew that Jane Doe didn't want to do the hotel nights. But D-Rock helped to control Cassie. Because remember how they said Jane Doe was calling KK, telling her what Diddy was telling her to do, and she was upset about it. And then KK said, well, I'll talk to him. I'll try to get him to calm down and roll it back or whatever. And then they said D-Rock was the one that was helping with Cassie. He would actually help to control Cassie. Okay, so now they said, the government says the defense is definitely going to probably say that this was all consensual and that that's not the way it happened or whatever. Then they talked about Jonathan Perez. You know, Jonathan Perez was a former assistant. He already testified some weeks ago. They basically talked about how Jonathan Perez knew about the things that were going on. All of these assistants were supposedly fixing up the hotel rooms, bringing all of the tools and everything there. Now they say they talked about interstate transportation to engage in prostitution and talked about how it violates federal laws. They said counts 3 and 5. They said the defendant knowingly transported an individual to interstates Okay.
You online?
Okay.
I
All
got
right,
early
see you.
tomorrow.
All right, love y'all. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Okay, yeah. I will. Okay, so with that, y'all see that on the floor, the wind is freaking out here. Now that's why everybody's leaving. Nobody's even really recording except for me. I'm still out here. I'm still boots on the ground, people. Like a tornado is coming or a hurricane. Y'all see what's going down? I want y'all to pay attention. But so anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up in a minute or two. So anyway, goes on to say that Diddy intended. Hold on. Oh, well, they said that Diddy was transporting these people. He was flying them out and all of that so that he would, so that they could engage in acts of prostitution. Okay, they said that's why, and he directed Cassie to have relations with these people. And they said that's why he should be found guilty on those counts. They said if you're using your common sense and your logic, then you know that he's guilty on this count. And then they showed a text message from where Diddy was trying to get one of the male workers. I want to say it was Paul. They said that basically he was trying to get the man to come to where he was so they could have a freak off. Okay, and said that he told him, I know it's last minute, but if you can make it, the tip is going to reflect that. So he basically told him, I'm giving you money because he's talking about a tip. So the prosecution said that's a sure way to verify that he was paying them for sex. Because he told him, if you can make it happen, I know it's last minute, but if you can just do this for me, I'll arrange everything, and the tip is going to be reflected in the price. And they also showed some receipts of some of the prices that were in fact added or charged to Diddy's MasterCard or his American Express. Then there was another guy, Jules. They said Diddy had arranged and paid for Jules' travel, and therefore he's guilty on count 3. Now, December the 11th of 2009 at a London hotel, there was a freak off. Okay, they were talking about how the party starts in the morning at 9 a.m. Okay, they paid for Jules' travel with American Express, and they showed the receipts of that. They said guilty on count 3. There was a guy by the name of Clayton Albert, September the 15th of 2014. Okay, through September the 17th of 2014. They showed the receipts. Okay, this was from New York City to Miami. Then afterwards, this guy deposited $3,000 into his bank account. That coincides with the dates of when he went out there with Diddy and Cassie and the money that he was given that was missing from the MasterCard. And so they said guilty on count 3. Now, they were really trying to show all these points to make the jurors see and believe that he's absolutely guilty on these counts. Then count 5, they said Jane and Cabral. Now, Cabral is the guy from Miami or from Atlanta that they call ATL. He was flown to Miami, New York City, Las Vegas, okay? And he was paid several $1,000s to have sex with Jane Joe. And they showed the receipts for that. Then there was a guy by the name of Paul Arthur, who was flewed out, as y'all say, to Turks and Caicos. This was March of 2023. They said, Diddy let me know how to make it happen. Diddy said, let me know how to make it happen, okay? And then he says, how do you want me to do it? These are text messages that they showed. How do you want me to handle the payment? Is what he said. How do you want me to do it? How do you want me to handle the payment? They said this proves coercion. Okay, they said that he orchestrated and paid for Paul's travel to Turks and Caicos for a hotel night. And they showed the receipts. Okay, they said Paul, Reggie, and Cabral, all 3 escorts, traveled, coordinated with the company Cowboys for Angels. And there was one named Reggie who went to the London hotel, and then Jane Doe texts saying that she sent $1,100. And let me show y'all something and tell you all something. They showed a picture, and it was just so disgusting. They showed like inside the hotel room, it was all nasty. There was baby oil juice everywhere, bussy juice and everything else. It was just all over the place. It looked like bodily fluids. There was a bunch of towels and sheets and all of that. And it was just gross. It was on a brown couch, okay? Please pay attention. And there was towels on the floor and on the couch. So they talked about the elements for inducement to travel. Okay, the conspirators knowingly, and that would be KK, okay? Diddy told KK that Jane Doe was going to Vegas. And then they played an audio where Diddy was like, they were talking about, Diddy said, hunt for the sexiest room. Hunt for the sexiest room for a Wild King night. That's what Diddy said in the audio. You know, I really wish his daughters hadn't been there to hear this stuff. His daughters, I mean, the boys are one thing. And by the way, King Combs did show up. I think he may have come late because I didn't see him earlier when I did the last video. But he was there. All of them were there. All six of his kids. Not Love, not Baby Love. But the other 6 were all there. And, but, you know, I just wish his daughters, they're so beautiful, all 3 of them. But I just wish they had not been there to hear some of this stuff. It was just a bit much. Okay? So they said KK knows exactly what's going on. She was right there in the midst of it, making the arrangements in some cases. That's what I wrote as a side note. Now, they say 3 elements of forced labor. Okay, the conspirator obtains or provided the labor or services for another individual. That's one of the elements. The conspirator used coercion. And then they talked about labor and services. There was 4 individuals. They said those individuals were Cassie, Jane Doe, Mia, and what was the other person's name? Cassie, Jane Doe, Mia. It was another person that worked for him. I can't think of who it was right now, but let me continue. Okay, so anyway, they said Cassie and Jane worked for hours, for grueling hours for the freak-offs. They said Cassie said the freak-offs were grueling. They showed the paperwork where Cassie said that. She said it was grueling, sometimes 12 to 30 hours. Longest was 4 days. Jane Doe said 24 to 30 hours, 3.5 days, and gave them, said they were given rugs, okay? They had to have sex with multiple men. They were sore, uncomfortable. They were also very uncomfortable for having to do this, and very difficult and uncomfortable sexual positions. If you all remember, Jane Doe had testified to saying that she was on a bed with her back hanging off the bed, and I guess she was like bottoms up maybe, and that she said her back was hurt and she was just very uncomfortable, and she had to do that for like 4 hours, I do believe, if I'm not mistaken. So they brought that up. They said the freak-offs literally became a job, according to Cassie. And Jane Doe said, I'm the one putting in all this uncomfortable work. So both of them referred to the freak-offs as work, said they didn't have time for anything else. After doing all these hours of freak-offs and being sore, having sores in their mouths, constant UTIs, they didn't have any time to do anything but recover. And sometimes it took days for them to recover. They say sometimes Diddy made them have these freak-offs and hotel nights, even when they had not recovered from the first UTIs that they had weeks prior. And also, they said that at one point, I think it was Cassie, that had UTIs so regularly that antibiotics no longer even worked. They had become resistant to the antibiotics. Now I want you all to think about that, ladies, if you've ever had a UTI, okay? They said these things were so painful, there was nothing enjoyable about the sex, and that it was very much so, it would burn and all of that. And sometimes they literally had to have these freak-offs and hotel nights while they were still suffering from a UTI. That's absolutely so sick. Like, I literally cringed. With that all being said, we'll see what the defense has to say about that tomorrow. I want to hear how they counsel that. So anyway, with that being said, there's some more information, you guys, but it's so windy out here. I think I'm going to have to give you guys the rest of this in the morning, okay? I got to go. The wind is literally about to blow me away, okay? So with that all being said, listen, I love you all to life. I hope you all enjoy the rest of this beautiful day. I'll see you all because I will be back in the morning and I'll finish up the recap, okay? And then I'll be out on break tomorrow to let you all know and fill you in on how the defense's closing argument is going. Because today, the beginning was a snooze fest. It got a little better towards the end, okay? A lot of it was stuff that we heard already and they were reiterating it. But again, I'm interested in hearing what they have to say tomorrow. So each one teach one. That's how we grow and thrive. Do something productive, constructive, but never destructive. And always remember, beloveds, to keep the Most High first in your lives.